Hi everyone, and welcome back to One Autistic Person. This is a video that I'm going to do that's going to go through a quiz that I'll put the link in the description for it, that sort of goes through questions that looks at the traits of hyperlexia, which I've just done a video regarding, a much more in-depth one regarding hyperlexia. So this is a bit of a different one to the one that I've done before. I find this one quite clunky. I'm not. It's not the most user-friendly quiz that I've ever done. Let's go through the questions and see where we come out with it. The other thing that annoys me about it is the fact that you have to put in your email address at the end, which is frustrating. So I always find those weird. And why do I need to give you an email address to get a result? Because it still gives you the result. Anyway. So the first question is around neurodivergency. So do you have any of the following neurodiversities? And the options are dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD or ADD, autism, or none of the above. So I'm going to tick autism as a definite because obviously I have a formal diagnosis of autism, but I also have a self-identification of ADHD and currently going through the process of getting a assessment for ADHD. So it gives a little explanation here as well of neurodiversity refers to variation in the human brain regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions. So as you can see, there's lots of sort of pictures and video-y sort of stuff in this, which is great because I think it's also quite often aimed, this will be aimed towards younger people as well, because it's a test that is probably best carried out for younger people. So the next one is, when you were younger, did you have an advanced ability to read words far above that, I think that's supposed to say rather than what would be expected of your age? I'm not judging them, by the way, by this saying than. The amount of times I put than rather than that because I'm writing too quickly. And the answers are no, very below average, no, average, yes, yes, above average. And obviously, if you see my previous video, I will keep referring back to that video. But if you've not watched it, yes, at the age of 8 years old, I had a reading age of between 16 and 18. So I was above average. Do you have difficulty understanding verbal language? Verbal communication is about language, both written and spoken. So yes, so difficulty in understanding verbal language. Sometimes, I think, because I don't always get what somebody is meaning, and the whole reading between the lines situation that I've had with previous videos that I've gone through. So yeah, I do have difficulties with it, but I wouldn't say that it is all the time. Do you find it difficult socializing and interacting appropriately with people? This might be participating in social activities or mixing socially with others. Yeah, it's very common, that one for me. Do you feel that you have abnormal or very awkward social skills? Social skills are the tools that enable people to communicate, learn, and develop healthy relationships. As I've touched on in many other videos that I've done, yes, I do have great difficulty, and I do find I've got extremely awkward social skills. Do you have specific or unusual fears? This could be a persistent and excessive fear of objects or situations. So situations, definitely. So I have social anxiety, so I get extremely scared about going out into the world on my own. I also have fears when it says about objects. I suppose that trypophobia, which I've touched on in another video as well, would be an extreme fear of certain objects that look a certain way and make me feel very, very uneasy. But yeah, I would say very often with this, both on the actually going and doing things, I have an in-depth fear of that, as well as certain objects and things. Do you have fixation with letters or numbers? This could be an obsessive interest in or feeling about numbers or certain letters. Yeah, so I do. Numbers, definitely. I find numbers extremely fascinating, and I will spend a lot of time trying to decode numbers. But I do also, as I've researched this, realise that I have a lot of an obsession with language. I love the way language sounds. I love the way different languages sound, the way words work, origins of words. So yeah, I would say I would probably use the word obsessive to an extent. So I would say often. I'm going to say often rather than very often, because it's not something that overtakes my life completely, but it is a big part of it. When you hear a word or phrase just spoken by another person, do you tend to repeat or echo it? Example: will you say again something something you have already said? So yes, I would say often with this. As I've said before, when I was younger, this was much more often, because to me this is relating to echolalia. I will repeat what somebody has said back to me in the way that they said it. So I sometimes can say it in an accent. I will say it with the same rhythm. I will follow a dialogued monologue on a TV show, and I will pick up on that monologue and look for meaning within it. So I'm going to say very often, actually. I am actually going to say very often do that, because it is quite often that I do that. And I repeat what somebody said straight away after they've said it, in the way that they've said it as well. That's the other thing. I say in the way, with the same tone of voice and the same sort of way that has sounded. The sound is important. Do you have an intense need to keep routine, difficulty with transitioning, and ritualistic behaviour? I feel like this is very much describing a lot of autistic traits, but I think they're intrinsically linked. So, and also it's kind of telling you, I can't remember now when I did it. I did it very quickly to go through it, but I don't know whether it told you whether you had hyperlexia 1, hyperlexia 2, or hyperlexia 3, or whether it would perceive that you had that. Obsessive and ritual behavior is characterized when your free time and conversation is dominated by special interests and obsessions. Absolutely, very often, all the time. I struggle to speak about anything outside of my special interests, and most conversations come back to my special interests, which ironically is now very much around autism and all of these different conditions that fall under the neurodivergent spectrum. And therefore it's extremely interesting for me to look into it, and therefore I talk about it all the time, to the point of where I do these videos. 11. When people are speaking, do you find that you listen selectively? Now, this one was really interesting because the answer is yes, often, very often to very often. I'm going to put often, but selective listening is the phenomenon that occurs when you only see what you want to see and hear what you want to hear. Well, it's only hearing what I want to hear, but I do only see what I want to see in things as well, or not want to, but what my brain perceives as important. I've said this quite often in other videos that I've done. I don't believe that it's that I want to, it's that my brain wants to, that my brain sees something and will see that that's the case, and I do selectively listen. I can hear bits of things and then not necessarily, and then completely have got it wrong. So I'd say often with that, not very often, but often. Do you have a strong auditory and visual memory? Visual memory means the ability to recollect information from things we have seen. Auditory memory means you have an ability to take information in that you have heard. So very often with both of those things, both auditory and visual memory are huge parts of my learning style. Do you have self-stimulatory behaviour, hand flapping, rocking, jumping, or jumping up and down? This is also known as stimming, a repetition of physical movements, sounds, words, or moving objects. Very often, all the time. Again, in other videos, I've talked about stimming and talked about how I stim, and that comes in the form of rocking. I rocked quite a lot in the last video. I noticed when I was just looking back at it. I do a lot of hand flapping, a lot of hand movements. Like I said in the other video, this is I use this as a squidgy toy. I have visual stims. I have auditory stims. I walk on the balls of my feet and pace a lot. So there's lots of stimming that sort of is involved in my life. Do you think in concrete and literal terms and have difficulty with abstract concepts? Concrete thinking is literal thinking that is focused on facts in the here and now, physical objects and literal definitions. Absolutely. This is why I have issues with metaphor and idioms. Sorry. And why I struggle reading between the lines, and I like to have a factual conversation rather than an emotional conversation. I find emotional conversations quite difficult to comprehend very often. Do you have difficulty answering WH questions such as what, where, who, and why? WH questions are questions starting with WH words, also including whom, which, whose, why, and how. What are you doing? Yes, to an extent, I would say this one is probably if you were to say what or why or how, I quite often struggle with those questions. which or who or whose I find which I can struggle with, actually, because which obviously is making a decision and I struggle with decisions. Who's probably the one that's the most difficult the one that's the most difficult to make a sort of understanding of, because I understand what things belong to people. So if somebody said, who's this, I would know the answer to that. But why, I struggle with answering why something's happening, or why or how something happened. So how is probably the most difficult one, because I really struggle with talking chronologically. So how is quite difficult. So I'm going to say often to that, not very. I'm going to say sometimes, because I think I can do it as well. I clearly can push my way through it. So I'm going to say sometimes. And then it's saying this is where I need my email address, which bothers me. But luckily, I don't need to blur this out, because I'm not bothered about anybody having this email address, because this is my YouTube related one. So if you wanted to email me, then feel free to do so. Doxing myself slightly there, I think, maybe. Submit. I thought I'd submitted it. So, Jason, this is not an official diagnosis. However, you may have high to severe hyperlexia characteristics. High to severe, like it is such a bad thing. I actually see hyperlexia as a really positive thing, not a negative, but it's interesting that it's seen that way. So I got 46 out of 52. Your score in this quiz may indicate that further testing is a good idea. You may be eligible for a free hyperlexia workplace needs assessment upcoming event here. So it might be interesting for me to have a look at that, to be honest with you. I'm not going to look at it right now, and I'm going to come back out of looking at that. But that's really interesting to me that I got a high score on it. But also the way that it's worded makes it sound quite negative, and I really don't see hyperlexia as a negative. I probably would have as a child, actually, thinking about it, if I go back to being a child, and it should have been managed better when I was a child, which I go into quite a bit around that in the other video, and how it affected me as a child. But as an adult, I think it's actually kind of a really good thing to have. It doesn't surprise me that I scored as highly as I did there. I think it's quite an interesting concept, and as I've said quite often throughout this video and the other one, that this is something I deeply relate to. So if you do the test, let me know what your scores are for it. Let me know what you think of it. As always, with all of my videos, my purpose is to share my experience with things, but also to hear your experience. So if you do the test, let me know what you got, and tell me what you think about hyperlexia, and whether you feel that this is something that relates to you. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.